Ladies and gentlemen, so if you have any questions, I believe that's the best way to get them across to our moderator. We'll pick up on your questions and try to direct which question actually fits best into the conversation. So please kindly scan the QR code. And I believe you may have crafted some questions already, so you can send those over right now. But I also want to draw attention to a QR code and also a survey form that's available on our portal. Please do kindly complete that survey form. Let us know how we're doing in terms of organizing the event for you, especially at the end of day one and then at the end of day two. And as we await more of our delegates to kindly join us back in the main hall, tomorrow, as you join us bright and early, please do ensure that you have your tags along with you as well, because you need those for attendance. And of course, this will allow you access to the breakfast area, the lunch, etc. Please do kindly join us in the hall right now, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just outside, we'll be starting the next session in under 2 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us relatively on time as we get ready to move into the next part of the event and put the focus now on the labor market. So, reform within the labor market is the main topic of conversation for session 3, and our focus is on future talent direction in fulfilling high-income country goals. We kind of touched on this a little bit in the very first panel, but this is the panel that will put the microscope on talent. So on that note, I'd like to invite Mr. Azirwan Arifin, the head of Office Employment Insurance System, PERKESO, to kindly join us on stage as he will be the moderator for this session.
Right.
Over to you, Mr. Azirwan, to begin.
All right, thank you, Terence. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu asyafi anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi rasuli wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi israhli sadri wa yassirli amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. La haula wala quwwata illa billah lillahil aliyil azim. Okay, now we're going to talk about labor reforms. Now we have 3 esteemed speakers with us today. I would introduce Mr. Thomas Matthew. He basically have 30 years of experience in corporate management, business strategy and risk management. He began his career as a banker, holding management position in corporate and commercial banking division. So he used to be the chief operating officer of MBF Holdings group of companies, and thereafter he was also the president. So I would like to invite Mr. Thomas on the stage. And the second speaker, Dr. Matthew Donnan. So he was previously, he is the senior economist with the World Bank's Social Protection and Jobs Global Practice. He leads World Bank Malaysia hubs in terms of work on social protection, aging, skills, and labor market policy. He also previously used to be the Deputy Director of the Development Policy Center at the Australian National University. So with due respect, I think I would also like to invite Dr. Matthew on the stage. And the third speaker today, Dr. Akiko Sakamoto. He is a Senior Regional Skills and Employability Specialist at the International Labour Organization, ILO, for Southeast Asia and the Pacific, which is currently based in Bangkok, Thailand. and he involved aggressively in the field of skills development and technical vocational education and training TVET for over 20 years. So I think he will be sharing with us a lot on skills development. So I would like to also invite Dr. Akiko Sakamoto on the stage. Now, I think the whole thing, how we're going to approach this, I think we will basically have a 10 minutes presentation by each of the panel. And once the whole presentation completed, then we will actually open up, we have a Q&A session. We will talk and discuss more on talent issue and perspective. So I think the first presentation, I would like to invite Mr. Thomas to actually do the presentations.
Thank you, Azirwan, Yang Berbahagia Dato', distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here together with Matthew and Akiko for this discussion and presentation today. So just to introduce, I'm Thomas Matthew from Talent Corp. So let me dive straight into the presentation since we are short of time. Okay, that's not helping. Okay. Can I just have the next slide? Okay, great, excellent. Okay, the discussion today is about strategies from my end, at least with respect to how we're going to build talents, to actually for the aspiration of the country to move into a high-income nation. But in creating strategies, we must always look at the challenges that faces the Malaysian's talent ecosystem. And this is something that we share with many panel sessions that I've had. We share this only because until and unless we face this daunting task of addressing these challenges, we're not going to move ahead with respect to building the talents. And let me share with you what the challenges are that we've faced over the number of years. The first is the creation of high-skilled jobs. And as you can see from the first quadrant, you'll realize that we are producing graduates at a 6% compounded growth annually. And as at 2022, it was about 5.9 million. But in terms of high-skilled jobs, we have about 2.18 million in the private sector. Of course, if you take into account the public sector, that's probably another 1 million. You're still looking at a shortage there. Now, how do you deal with this issue to create high-skilled jobs? And it's not rocket science here. It is bringing in investment. If you ask the local companies, there's so much they can do to create jobs. You need investments to come in to drive job creation for the locals, or at least high-skilled jobs. And I think both Kementerian Ekonomi and the government is doing a wonderful job there together with METI to drive investments into the country. And that's something we need to do. So from Talent Corp's side, if there's any assistance we provide here is through My Expats. We have with Kementerian Ekonomi formed Expats Gateway to actually ease the process of doing business. Okay, so that's the first challenge that we have. Now the second challenge is even more daunting, which is the underemployment. And as at 2023 figure, we are running at about 2 million in terms of underemployment. Essentially what it says is what we have in terms of holders, graduate and degree and diploma holders, their jobs that they undertake doesn't commensurate with the qualifications that they have. So there's a mismatch here. And that's really where the challenge lies also with the country. And if you look at Khazanah Research Institution study, it says 2 out of 3 of our graduates earn less than 2,000 ringgit. Hence the government's drive to push minimum wage as well as progressive wage policies. Now the third challenge is with respect to unemployment. Now we know that the number stands at about 3.5%, but if you take it or break it down by granular in terms of age group, you'll realize that more than 50% of them are within the ages of 15 to 24, and it captures a lot of the fresh graduates that come out there. So again, that's a challenge that we have. A lot of them go into the gig economy, statistics of which we don't have, but at the last count it was close to 1.3 million. Now, the fourth challenge is the female workforce retention. Malaysia doesn't do quite well there. We probably are the worst in the region, and when it comes to conversion of the female representation into the workforce, it stands at about 56% now, and under the Madani Economic Framework, our aspiration is to hit 60% by 2030. So that's a challenge that we have. The next slide, please. So this is a bit about Talent Corp. I'm not going to go too much into this, but basically we are here to help drive the Malaysia's talent strategy. We partner quite a bit with both government, educational institutions, and the industries. And we were mandated as a think tank for KESUMA. And where we believe very strongly is there are sometimes needs for structural reforms within the systems that we have in place today if we are to build the right talents for the country. Next slide, please. Okay. Malaysia's advantages as an investment destination. I think Malaysia has a lot of positives going for it as far as an investment destination goes, and I don't think I want to say too much about that here. But the point is, if you ask any investor that wants to come into the country, the first thing they will ask you is whether you have the talents ready for their investment. I just want to highlight here that talent is today the #1 criteria as far as investors goes. Next slide. Okay, and if we are to drive strategies, what is important is labor market information. It must be strong, it must be robust, it must be credible. And the labor market information, particularly with respect to demand data, will help drive shaping, developing policies that we want to put into place as far as in terms of talent development. And if you look at what we have today, in terms of supply data, we have a number of sources, and demand data, it's all reflected there. But the point is, it's rather fragmented. How do we centralize this? How do we converge them into something more meaningful is what we want. Because when you have the right labor market information, especially with respect to demand data, clearly you can do a lot more in terms of enhancing employment forecasting, and it will definitely support data-driven policy making. Next slide. Okay, this is something that Talent Corp has always been proponing, quadruple helix stakeholder engagement. We want talent, the industry, the government, and the learning institutions to come together. We live in a world today where, unlike 30, 40 years ago, the gap between the industry and the academia is widening year by year. Okay, because the industry is evolving so fast, the academic institutions cannot cope up with the changes that are happening. In fact, if you look at the better successful academia that's in place today, a lot of them actually have industry professionals, people within the institutions driving to make sure that what's produced at the end of the day, the talents that are produced at the end of the day, meets exactly what the industry wants. And industry readiness is a key challenge that we have today in our country. So we try and bring, like I said, all of these parties together for the mutual benefit of all, and ultimately to create the talent force that we need for the country. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, something that we want to share with you. We spoke to ILO, realizing that there is a divergence between what is required by the industry and what the academia is producing. We actually spoke to ILO when we embarked on this Sector Talent Council. ILO actually spoke to us and they recommended a sector-based approach. A number of countries use this. Singapore uses this, India uses this, Australia uses this. In India's case, National Skills Development Corporation is an organization within the Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship that they have done. And they have 36 sector councils under NSDC, or the corporation. And each one of them, industry leaders sit in each one of them and drive the skilling requirements for the sector. We embarked on a similar approach last year. End of last year, we actually launched the Future Skills Talent Council, and in March of this year, we created the first sector talent council for the E&E, led by industry. So we have the likes of Micron, Infineon, Inari, you name it, all the major players sit on the council together with the ministry. So we have JTM, we have JPK, we have PTPK, we have NIOSH, and of course Talent Corp as secretariat. The industry members chooses their own chairman. In the case of E&E, they chose KC Lau of Inari as the chairperson. Now, what do we hope to achieve through this is, through the sector, they will identify the skilling that is required by the sector, the immediate need. And through that council, because they're representing the whole sector, they will identify the needs and also work with us together with the academia to create the talents that are required for the particular sector. And we have since set up a number of other FSTCs, ICT, aerospace, biopharma, food manufacturing, GBS, as well as retail and wholesale. Next slide, please. And using this council, we actually have embarked on a study of the impact of AI, digital, and sustainability on the workforce. What are we planning to do here is basically we are trying to future-proof our workforce. Understanding that digital, AI, and sustainability are going to be drivers of change for our workforce for the future, the intention is to work together with the industry to identify the skills registry for the roles within that sector, to identify the jobs that are going to be impacted within the next 3 to 5 years because of AI, digital, and sustainability on the workforce, to understand what is required by the highly impacted worker in that workspace, what he requires in terms of skills to remain within the sector or actually to pivot out, and also what are the emerging jobs that comes from the sector. Now, all of this, what we're planning to do is capture into a platform called My Mahe Kusuma, which will be launched in October by this year. So look forward to that place because it is going to be a game changer as far as the workforce goes for the country. Next slide, please. So in ending, I would like to say this, and we believe very strongly the government alone cannot do enough to solve the human resource issues. Only partnering with industries and academia, we can do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. I guess effort on the talent itself is just like, we are biting off more than what we can actually chew, I guess. And to actually summarize a point that you have presented, I think one of the things that the rise of artificial intelligence itself and automation has basically reshaped the industry. So I think this is a point where the alteration of DNA between the supply and demand, and when you talk about the significant rise in the youth participation within the gig economy itself, have actually directed this source into a different model altogether. And not to forget, the uprising of ESG have basically boost up the importance and the involvement of a care economy. Now, I would like to move to our second panel, Dr. Matthew, which Dr. Matthew will share the presentation for 10 minutes. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I can also not make, it does work. What we've heard from Thomas is really a summary of a number of the important challenges that are facing the labour market in Malaysia. What I will do is hone in a little bit on specific challenges, and what I'd like to do is try to link these with broader income growth in Malaysia. And the central message of my presentation, and I'll say it now because I know we're limited for time, is that skills are important because they allow workers to interact with technologies, with processes, which in turn lead to higher productivity. Why is that important? Well, higher productivity is the basis for higher incomes, it's the basis for higher wages, it's the basis for broader economic growth. And this interrelatedness of skills, productivity, and income is reflected in the data. reflected in cross-country data comparisons, it's reflected in data from within countries. So you'll see there in the chart on the left, high-income countries have greater shares of high-skilled employment. That's a fact. And so you've got Malaysia there in yellow. On the left of Malaysia, you have a number of high-income economies, all of which have a higher share of high-skilled employment as a percentage of total employment. And then on the right, you see a number of other upper middle-income countries and lower middle-income countries, all of which have a lower share of high-skilled employment. We also know that high-skilled workers tend to have higher wages. I think everyone in this room knows that. But here we have some data from Malaysia looking at workers by income level and their skill level. And so in the poorest decile of workers, only around 11% of workers are in high-skilled employment. On the other hand, in the upper income decile, so the richest 10% of workers, it's 85%, that figure. So again, what these charts point to is the important role that skills play in enabling people to earn higher incomes. And to repeat what I said earlier, skills enable workers to enable with technologies, with processes, which increase their productivity. That in turn increases their incomes. There is, however, an important caveat to this. Those gains from skills, those productivity gains, the associated income gains, are only realised upon employment. And not just any employment, but employment which utilises those skills, which is commensurate with those skills. So in other words, human capital needs to be effectively utilised in order for it to result in higher productivity and in higher incomes. And I think that is really where the key challenge is in Malaysia currently. And it's been a challenge which I think has been increasing in importance over the last decade. So I want to discuss skills-related underemployment a bit here, and Thomas did speak about this in his talk as well. So skills-related underemployment in Malaysia is currently around 36%. So what that means is that 36% of tertiary degree or diploma holders are employed in occupations which don't require that education level. And the challenge is more significant for particular groups of workers. You see in the chart on the bottom right-hand side of that slide, that figure is actually 73% amongst workers who are in the informal sector. It's also higher for women. The figure is 45% in the case of females. And the reason that this is significant is because skills-related underemployment is an important reason for why wage growth has been slower than hoped for in Malaysia. People employed in roles below their education level, or which don't fully utilise their skills, have lower levels of productivity than they could have, and they are paid less as a result. And I think equally concerning is not just the level, but the trend. Skills-related underemployment has been steadily growing in Malaysia over the last decade. And I think there are a number of different reasons for that. Skills mismatches are certainly important, and I believe Akiko is going to speak about that in a little bit more detail shortly. So in other words, people being trained in the wrong area or developing skills for which there is no demand in the labour market. The quality of teaching and of education is also of concern, and we heard a little bit of discussion about that in the previous session. But I think more fundamentally, if we consider the economy as a whole, the fact is that there are simply more graduates entering the labour force every year relative to the number of high-skilled jobs that have been created in the economy. And this is something that we can see in the chart on the right-hand side of the slide that I've got up there. It's actually a chart which B&M published fairly recently. So it shows in the green the increase in graduates, tertiary graduates that is, and on the right, or in the pink I should say, it shows the increase in high-skilled jobs generated in the same year. And we also see it in these two graphs. So on the left-hand side here, on the top, we have educational attainment in the Malaysian workplace over time. And you can see that the proportion of the labour force which has a tertiary education, which is the top blue in the bar there, it's growing over time. At the same time, high-skilled employment is growing. That's shown in the chart on the bottom left in the bright blue. It's growing, but it's not growing as quickly as the number of university entrants to the labour market. So in other words, it's little wonder that we see this rising trend in skills-related underemployment. That also has another impact, and it's an impact on wages. So the wage premium for education has been falling in Malaysia over time. And we see that in the graph on the right. And if you draw your attention to the very right hand figure or bunch of columns, in that chart, you see the wage premium for a tertiary degree holder relative to someone with a primary school education. The orange shows Malaysia from independence over a 10-year period, and then we see each decade after that. And so you see this wage premium is falling over time. And I think it's important to note this isn't a surprise. This is exactly what the theoretical literature tells us should happen. As countries develop, as they become richer, more people are educated, the scarcity of that education also disappears, and so the returns are less. Whether it's a good or a bad thing, I think is a difficult question to answer. It really does depend on our normative view of what inequality should look like in the country. On the one hand, I think everyone can agree that we don't want a situation where the skills premium is so low that people choose not to become educated. I don't think we're there yet. The skills premium in Malaysia is still higher than it is in most high-income countries. On the other hand, we also don't want excessive inequality. And this is something, of course, that has been highlighted in the 12th Malaysia Plan. One thing to note, actually, is the target of compensation of employees. It doesn't really look at this wage inequality. It looks at the division between the percentage of national income going to labour and that going to capital. But what we see in most high-income countries is that inequality over recent decades has been rising not because of falling compensation of employees, but rather because of a divergence in wages. So those who are at the top decile, the top income decile, their wages have been rising faster than those at the bottom income decile. Now, labour force participation is another point, is another important topic. People need to participate in the labour market in order to utilise their human capital. In aggregate, labour force participation in Malaysia is quite good, but it's low for certain groups. It's low for women, it's low for older persons. And so the chart on the bottom left-hand side of this slide compares the gender gap in labour force participation across a number of countries. Malaysia is in the green, and you can see it's quite high there relative to other countries, including other countries with lower income levels than Malaysia. Interestingly, within Malaysia, we see that this gender gap in labour force participation is especially high for workers who are not educated. On the right-hand side, we see the employment rate of older persons, or persons aged between 50 and 75. And again, it's a cross-country comparison. Malaysia is there in the yellow. And you can see right away that employment of older persons is very low in Malaysia relative to other OECD countries, but also relative to a number of other countries which are at a similar income level to Malaysia, countries like Mexico or Chile, and also lower than neighbouring countries like Thailand. So raising this labour force participation of these groups is important in order to increase incomes of those groups. So, I think that the challenge for Malaysia in the years ahead is very clear. To increase incomes or wages, people need to be employed in good jobs, or in other words, in high productivity jobs. And for that, skills acquisition, skills development is a critical ingredient, but it's not a sufficient ingredient alone. Employment in good jobs that utilise the skills is needed, and to this end, people need to engage in the labour market, so labour force participation needs to increase amongst certain groups. And there also needs to be industries which have high levels of productivity or offer jobs with high levels of productivity need to grow. Now, Malaysia will face this challenge at the same time as it experiences a number of megatrends, which are affecting not just Malaysia, but a number of other countries in the world. So I've already spoken a little bit about aging. It is going to reduce the working age population relative to the overall population. That is going to create pressure on the labour market, and it really points to the importance of encouraging labour force participation amongst older workers. Technological change is another megatrend that I would highlight. Automation, artificial intelligence. The effect of these is not fully clear. I think it's clearer in the case of automation, and I've included some findings from some work that we've done on the top right-hand side of this slide, which show that workers who are without a tertiary education are more likely to be impacted by automation. In the case of AI, however, it's much less clear whether that is going to be the case. What I think is important, though, is that the policy prescriptions in both areas are fairly similar. What is needed is a flexible workforce, which is encouraged and supported to reskill, to upskill as appropriate or as needed. And that, in turn, points to the importance of lifelong learning and to the importance of foundational skills which underpin that lifelong learning. I'll stop there. Terima kasih.
All right, thank you, Dr. Matthew. Well, I guess when we actually look at the data itself, I mean, the environment that we're facing from my future job, if I can actually extend to confirm your presentation, at the moment in terms of supply, we have the demography of about 80% actually have diploma and above. But when they actually look at the demand, the vacancies required by the industries, I think at the moment 76% basically jobs advertised as PM and below. So this basically will provide much more double up the unmatched environment. But however, we actually look at the unemployment rate, I mean from DOSM perspective, 3.3%, and my future jobs, we do projection, and we are projecting that in a best case scenario, we're going to have 3.2% unemployment rate. On worst case scenario, assuming that the pandemic will actually come again, it can actually go up to a highest of 3.8%. So, but still, I guess we cannot count our chicken before it hatch. So yes, it looks okay, but in the real fact that we do have unmatched and underemployment issues that may actually disrupt this order. Now, Dr. Akiko, Malaysia is been coupled with a declining fertility rate of 1.8, and of course, aging population. This also surrounding the effect of labor market. So, and youth employment rate basically remains challenging at 11%, although we have actually reduced from 14. So I guess these are things that perhaps you will share in your presentation as well. Then I would like to invite for you to perhaps share with the audience and enlighten them with your slides. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And also, I'd like to start by thanking organizer for inviting ILO and myself to participate in this important conference and also contribute to the very interesting discussion here. How do I manage this? Yeah. In the recent years, ILO had an opportunity to work with a number of Malaysian partners from the government, and the industries and training sector, and supporting the national effort in strengthening the skills and TVET system. So I'm very pleased here to share some of the thoughts that could be considered for as we think about the future direction of the skill development effort in the countries. Interestingly, I would like to just start to contextualize the points I would like to make by just sharing with you the two slides. But the first slide is really the point that has been covered by two previous speakers. It seems to be, I promise you, we did not speak before. But we seems to be, there is a convergence on a concern, common concern about the sort of a connection between skill development effort and then the creation of the high skills, high wage job that actually demands those skills. So there's an issue. I think that as countries think about the shift to the high income countries, you certainly need that on one hand, highly educated and qualified workforce. But on the other hand, also what you need is that the sort of the creation of high skills wage, basically a good quality job on the other, that which utilize those skills, and then the graduate can engage in those high skill, the high skill job. But as already pointed out, in Malaysia, that the level of the education among workforce is really increased, the very fast increase. But at the pace of the high skills job creation does not seem to be keeping up in the current pace. As already noted, that there is a significant underemployment. Currently 37%, more than 1 in 3. That with those who are tertiary graduates are actually doing a semi-skills and low-skills job. And then among the young cohort, this figure is actually higher. So it's a concern. And then the high-skilled job is increasing, but at a much lower rate, slower rate. So the point I'm making is that, yes, it is important to continue the effort on generating, skilling up the workforce, but we need to pay more attention, great attention to the demand side of the skills issues. The second about the point, the structural challenge in the labor market I want to point out is that we want to make this growth path inclusive, right? So here, I don't know whether the word is correct, but the labor market is becoming complex. There's on one hand, there's a rise of the new form of work, including the gig economy, with all the challenges and opportunity that comes with it, and requiring a different approach to skill development. On the other hand, digitals and the green transition, yes, indicating a high job skills, job potential, but they need to be equipped with the relevant skills to seize those opportunities, and also those who access to the new job created by that transition are not necessarily those who have lost a job because of that transition. So we need to really think about the support to this group of people to promote a just transition, combination reskilling, maybe income support, and then a job matching support. And then there's other underserved group and then with diversified needs that the system needs to cater for. There are 3 things that I would like to actually point, 3 points I would like to make in order for consideration for the future directions of the skill development. First, I think that I'm probably reinforcing the view that had been presented earlier. Skills needs to be, driver of the skills job creations, But then the skills need to be key solution for, business solution, industry upgrading and value addition so that it creates a job that actually demands those skills. However, there are a lot of efforts actually being made in Malaysia, but as far as I could see the division between training sector and the business sector still remains. The demand and supply of skills not sufficiently aligned and integrated. That's continuing. So therefore, that quality and relevance of the training is consistently being questioned by the employers and the industries. And then this situation, really requires further attention. We need to really shift away from the skills as largely a supply side issue. It could be and it should be an integral part of the creating the job demand. How do we do it? To something simple is that we need to, as of the enterprise and industry sector, plan the skill development. They need to plan about skills as a part of an integral part of the business and industry strategy, meaning that ask where the business wants to go, how the sector wants to grow first, and then think about what skills are needed and how the skills can actually to support that. So the initiative like Dr. Matthew mentioned about the Future Skills Talent Council, it's nice, I think it shows that we've been speaking for quite some time together on promoting this sectoral approach. I think that this institutional mechanism taking a sectoral approach, skills such as Sector Skill Council Talent Council is a really a good practice to move this idea forward. Second one is that skill development system. We really need to be more promoter of the and upskilling and lifelong learning for all. And meaning that this would mean that work for the existing system, working on less familiar terrain. Because first, we need to think about skill development, not for the new entrants, but also existing workers, those who are already in the labor market. The system, to some extent, the Malaysia also system does that, but this is a relatively underdeveloped area and it needs a further attention. Another thing, as the skill needs changes so rapidly, workplace becomes such an important place of learning. But we need a further thought about how to support increasing investment in the workplace learning or how to improve the quality of learning and so on. Third point, we need to really cater for, to really drive inclusive growth. Think about embracing different learning mobility, meeting different learning needs, to reach out those who are underserved, reach out to the women who are actually not participating in the labor force. It's a really waste of the national talent, right? And then to facilitate their skills in a non-traditional area. And then when you think about enabling access to the skills training for the migrant workers, which also play a major important role in the Malaysian context. So offering flexible learning pathway is very critical. Malaysia does that, but it's important that those flexibilities needs to be promoted without compromising quality and then coherence in a system. What is also needed is that these skills efforts need to be supported by enabling environment, notably timely integrated labor market information. Financial support is also needed to encourage individuals to participate. Paid work leave is a help for the workers the work often say that they don't have the time to be training. Another thing is that this is a big subject in itself, but I cannot elaborate too much, is that how that wage system could consider the skill level, shift to the skill-based wage system. That's also motivating the individual to participate in training. Effective employment services also a must. And the third point, and I'm coming to the almost end, the skills for future. Here, I think it's more familiar discussion for you, so I don't need to elaborate too much. The system needs to respond to the new skills needs, green and digital skills. It's really, we talk from the education session that digital literacy is must for all. But here, we need to really keep working on the technical, in equipping people, individual with relevant technical skill, but there's a greater emphasis of the non-technical. Here also, I echo with the earlier discussion the importance of non-cognitive, non-technical skills importance to really navigate, especially workers to navigate increasing uncertain labor market. Ability to learn, take initiative, adaptable, sense-making, those things are really becoming important. And then there's a lot of, and then how do we teach is an issue. So then it goes back to some of the discussion I heard is that, how can we embrace and then put in practice learner-centered approach to training, and then pedagogical changes to nurture those skills. I heard it's very difficult in a previous session, but it's need to be worked on. Trainer needs to be upgraded, right? Skills to because there is a different way to teach. We are talking about trainers should not be providing answer from the beginning. They should really let the student to find a question to pursue and to arrive and then inquire to find the solution. So last point is that I started talking about the importance of high skills, high skilled and high skilled job, but it is important to continue the really current good effort to invest in skill of the semi-skilled workers, because we can think about the future, but the future does not come tomorrow, right? It needs to be that the process is incremental, and then the current economy needs good quality semi-skilled workers to actually to bring and guide the path to the high income economy. Summary. I think there's a lot of good effort already taken in Malaysia, but for me, need to be more aligned, integrated, and then less fragmentation. This is really pity to see that different good work being done but not connected, integrated. More flexible, inclusive, but ensuring quality and coherence. We need to may need to think about the partnership as well. I did not talk too much about this, but I think there is a fine issue about government leadership and the industrial leadership in steering the development of skill development. You know, it's of course government have a continued an important role to play, especially development of a strategic sector, but industries partnership need to be promoted by the government, assumed by the industries, because as I think that Matthew said, is the government cannot do it alone, also that Thomas said. And then, so therefore, we need to continue a good work, at the same time addressing some of the new concern that the future of work demands it. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Akiko. So basically, she spoke about the skills driver for high skills job creations. I think these are the things that we need to respond effectively. We're talking about the development of artificial intelligence, the green technology, the digital, as well as renewable energy. I think I can actually vouch to that. I think we did a quarterly analysis in terms of sunset, sunrise. I mean, as simple as we found out that, like for example, secretary work will no more require in future. So go back and tell your PA start upskilling, because ChatGPT is coming after them. And even we talk about the equity market, you know, the buyer don't need any more stockbroker advice, because that can be done easily through ChatGPT. And you did also mention about the big data, the importance of labor market informations that need to be actually come timely to make sure that policy intervention can come and address immediately. And the last part you did mention, which is I really like it, the effective employment services. I think this, because employment services will actually play a great role to make sure that on the ground, the facilitation need to happen, and not just that, through the system, job portal, the matching can actually be done through AI. Now it's already more than 3 o'clock, so I need to confirm with the organizer. We need to stop now. Okay, all right. So we apologize, because as much as possible, I wish to actually ask more questions, but I think the time doesn't permit. But however, what we can actually gather from here is there's a need to actually have an effective ecosystems surround that be able to respond immediately to the market changes. And we also need to actually look at the labor market information data comprehensiveness, not just making sure that it's available, but the way how we interpret and the way how we respond to it. And the third one, I think the robust policy intervention, which not just looking at making sure that everyone got a job, but making sure that the salary, skills, and industry are being prepared timely to make sure that not just having to work, but making sure that there's a career progression and at the same time is sufficient and develop career management. So I guess that's all, guys. Thank you very much for your focus. So Terence, I throw back to you.
What a timely discussion. Thank you very much, sir, for taking to the time. And thank you, panel. Let's give them a big round of applause. I'd like to invite the panelists and moderator to kindly pose for a quick photograph. I'm so amazed how they managed to complete so much in so little time. Let's have a group photograph, everyone, to wrap up the session, just right in front of the table there. Thank you. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, we draw your attention to the QR codes. I hope that everyone has a chance to pose their questions. I understand that it's impossible for the moderator to pick up on all your questions, so what most moderators do is they'll sift through the questions, look at similar sounding ones, and kind of combine them together. So I do believe that's what's happened with most of our panel. However, if your question stood out to you and you may want an answer, do kindly reach out to us via the portal as well. Pose that question and tell us which topic you had that question prepared for, and we'll try to get an answer your way as soon as possible. That's what the portal is for as well. So it opens up the conversation to more than just us here in this hall. It's also to you watching at home or in the comfort of your office via the online platforms. So please do kindly reach out to us via the portal that's just been launched and engage us in conversation about RMK13 as we move forward. So from the labor markets, before we jump into the next session, Running Coffee will be out soon, but that doesn't mean everyone runs out at the same time. You can choose to run out at any given opportunity. However, please do be timely in making it back into the hall. We will be moving on to our next session without any break, so buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go all the way to 5 p.m. Here we go with our next panel. I do believe things are all nicely set up on stage. The theme is Memperkukuh Kesejahteraan Rakyat dan Mempertingkat Mobility, enforcing social mobility and the well-being of the people. So our topic, we have divided this session into two. Firstly, for the panel, we'll be going through demographic changes, preparing Malaysia towards an aged nation. This is something so very close to my heart, being 43, having a 13-year-old kid, and looking forward to aging gracefully. Yes, all this is natural, if you can believe it. And we will also be looking forward to our final session of the day, Sustainable Mobility, Pioneering Public Transport Solution for Malaysia's Future. So we have two sessions to get to, and I won't want to keep you any further. I'd like to introduce our moderator for our first session. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Manon Bernier, UNDP Resident Representative for Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei Darussalam. Let's welcome Ms. Bernier to the stage.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be moderating the last, but I would say not the least, panel for today with very esteemed and distinguished panelists. I'm sure that even if this is the last hour of the day, I'll get the attention of everyone, because first it's a topic that is about well-being, so it touches every one of us, our families, our community. I think Malaysia has always put the concept of well-being of the Raya at the center of its social and economic development, and it's good to see that it's also part of the vision for the 13 Malaysia plan. And when we talk about well-being, Malaysia has an index actually on well-being, which really putting together, looking at different variables and dimension of economic well-being, economic factors, employment, revenues, but also looking at social, health, community, family. And it was good to see from the DASM statistics that actually Malaysia is moving positively on the well-being index. But we also know, and it was introduced this morning, that was Unika, the mega trends that will affect Malaysia. And Malaysia has entered in that aging phase, which will have a lot of social and economic impact in the next future. So this is what we are going to discuss with our panelists in the next hour. I will introduce them one by one before I invite them to speak to the stage. So first, we have Mr. Philip O'Keefe. You might know him already on the name of Pip, I'm told everyone calls you. He's Professor of Practice and Director of the Aging Asia Research Hub at CEPA. And prior of joining CEPA, Philip worked at the World Bank from 1993 to 2021, so a very long career at the World Bank. In Washington, Beijing, Sydney, Budapest, so has pretty much seen a lot about aging all over the world. He was also a founder member of the global expert team on social assistance, and he also led the human development economist at EAP. He was also the lead author and core member on numerous flagships of the World Bank publication and as well regional aging report. So we look forward to hear your global, regional perspective and how it's going to impact as well Malaysia. Our second guest speaker, welcome, is the Emeritus Professor Datuk Dorma Mansor. I think she's probably known from several of you as well. She's the Director of Social Wellbeing Research Center at University of Malaya. And she has been in this position since 2013, and has led a number of research this area, and she has served as an advisor and consultant for various as well global organizations, including my own organization, UNDP, the World Bank, ILO, OECD, and the EU ADB. So as an academic, Professor Mansor has written extensively in books and journals in areas of public and social policy, aging, and social protection. So welcome. Our third panelist is coming from the health sector. So we're really looking at the different dimension of aging. Dr. Wei Ong, welcome. He is actually the director of the research. The executive officer of the Health Transformation Office in the Ministry of Health. But prior to that, he has served in several positions, including consulting with the World Bank and the World Health Organization. Most of his assignments related to aging population as well. He also served as the country director for the Malaysia Health Symptom Research Project, collaboration between the Ministry of Health and Harvard University. So, warm welcome. And our last panelist is Mrs. Yap Siu Eng, who will bring us the industry perspective, which is also very important. She is the recruitment director at Hire Seniors, a recruitment platform focused on connecting experienced and mature professional, seniors and retirees to company in need of experienced and skilled resources. And I think it connects to our previous session where we're talking about workforce and skills. And she has over 30 years of experience in strategic and operational aspects of human resources management that include recruitment, employee engagement, training, development, and talent management. So warm welcome. I think we'll have a very good conversation this afternoon. Just to give 2-3 data points as we start our conversation, and I ask our first speaker to come in. In 2022, 7.2% of the population in Malaysia turned 65 and above. So Malaysia has entered in this aging era that we can say. And this number will double by 2040, which is the vision for the Malaysia plan. So it will be nearly 15%. And by 2056, which is what Jeffrey Sachs was telling us to look at, actually, it will be more than 20%, which is what we call now super age Asian. So this transition will have, of course, several consequences on social and economic that will need to be planned. It will change, and aging will demand on families as well, on social protection, on government, and on private sector. So first, I would like to invite Dr. Philip O'Keefe to share a little bit his insights, looking really at demographic trends globally and in Malaysia as well, and what does it mean from a social and economic perspective for the country as we're thinking through the 13 Malaysia plan.
Thank you very much, Manon. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to KE for inviting me and seeing so many old friends here as well. It's lovely this afternoon. Which direction do I point? That one? There we go. Now, Manon has already started us on some of this big picture, so I'll elaborate on that a little bit in this first slide. And this is about the pace of ageing and that transition that she was talking about, this demographic transition. If we step back even before this slide, I think one thing to say is that in Asia, the East Asian tigers, if you look backwards from the 60s to about the year 2000, different estimates say that maybe between a quarter and a third of the economic growth and the major economic growth we saw in those countries over that period was due to positive demographics, that is a growing working age population. Look forward now, and that was true for Malaysia also. You had this demographic tailwind. You're in a sailing boat and the wind's behind you. You set sail and you just sit back and enjoy the weather kind of thing. It's not quite that simple, but Malaysia set its sail and had a tailwind behind it. All the countries in Asia now, that's changed. That tailwind has died off and they're sailing into the wind now. Demography is hurting them in terms of their growth prospects rather than helping them. So you think of sailing down when you sail straight, you don't have to concentrate too much. If you sail into the wind, you have to go back and forth, back and forth. It's a lot more effort to get the same distance. So think of it in those terms, that you're moving from a tailwind to a headwind. Now, this transition that Manon talked about from ageing society, which is 7% or more of the population, 65 and above, to aged, which is 14%, to super-aged, it's not unique to Malaysia. You see in this figure here, that process takes about 34 years in Malaysia, but across Asia, that's very much the case. It's a very common pattern, and in fact, it was even faster in Korea, in Thailand, and Vietnam. But nonetheless, compared to the OECD countries, and they're the ones down the bottom, their transitions took, at times, 150 years or 100 years. They had a long time to adjust to this ageing process. They had a long time to get rich. They had a long time to build social security systems. They had a long time for societal attitudes to adjust. That is not a luxury that anywhere in Asia has, and it's not a luxury that Malaysia has. The economic part of that you see on the top right-hand side, and that shows you the year in which countries reach their peak working age population share and how that compares to the United States at the same point. So the US on the left is 100%. Malaysia, as you see, is reaching that same demographic point of peak working age share at about 50% of the income level that the United States did, and well below other countries, Germany, Australia, you see them there. That said, on the glass half full part of the story, it's well above China, it's well above Vietnam, it's well above Thailand at the same point. So this story of getting old before getting rich is true in Malaysia, but it's not as true as some of your neighbours. So that's the kind of half full glass rather than the half empty glass. The driver of all this is, of course, it's that life expectancy is continuing, but that's not the main driver. The main driver is fertility. And that's where in Asia, the rapid fall in fertility is really striking and really world-beating. You probably know in Korea, the average woman now has 0.7 of a child. If one can have 0.7 of a child, but on average, 0.7 of a child. So the fertility is the big driver of this story in Asia. If we look at some of the effects of that, the first one, which is an obvious one that I've already referred to, is that the share of working age population shrinks as the population gets older. That's an inevitable dynamic of these kind of population dynamics. So you've got a smaller working age population to drive growth. You've got, as a result, if you just leave everything the same, you'll have lower economic growth. And you will certainly, even if you don't leave things the same, but certainly if you do, have higher age-related spending in your budget. So these are some estimates for Malaysia, and I don't attach too much precision to them. Economic models, I think, are never right, but they're often useful. And I think of it in those terms. So basically in Malaysia, looking out to 2050, about a third of your decline in growth will be accounted for because of the negative demographics, because of that headwind that I was talking about before. That's if you do nothing else. Equally, on the fiscal side, if nothing changes, you'll be spending about 3.5% more of GDP per year on age-related spending. Pensions being the biggest one, but health, social benefits, long-term care is not even there, but you can add that as well. The good news, though, again, the glass half full, is that this is the story of nothing changes. We do know, though, that you've been investing in human capital and can invest more. We do know that people are living healthier lives and longer lives, so they would be able to, in principle, to work more. So there are many things that can be done to offset these kind of status quo kind of impacts. But nonetheless, I think they increase the urgency of the kind of reforms we've been talking about in areas like education, health, fiscal policy. Oops, sorry, back one. Okay. Another one that, this gets talked about a lot, the growth and the fiscal. Another one that gets talked about a lot less in the context of ageing is inequality. And what you see in societies is as they age, unless they have very offsetting tax and transfer systems, they get more unequal. And you see it here for Malaysia. These graphs are think of them as Gini coefficients. They're not, but they're a similar kind of measure of inequality. The higher that number is, the more unequal the group is. So you see here, the groups, if you can see right down the bottom, it's hard to see. The groups that are born earlier, their lines are higher. So that the longer that cohort lives, the more unequal that cohort becomes. And it's intuitive at one level if you think about it. We all start as kids, we come out of our mother, and we're all kind of equal at one level at that point. But then I get well educated, you get poorly educated. I get a bad job, you get a bad job. I become unhealthy as a result, you don't become unhealthy. So inequalities accumulate over life. And what we see, we looked at this for Malaysia, and again, if just from ageing, we would expect inequality in Malaysia to increase by about 5% by the early 2040s and by about 8 or 9% by the 2050s. So again, these are things that can be offset with tax and transfer policies. There are answers to this. OECD countries do that. That's exactly what they do with progressive income taxes, with good safety nets, with good social protection systems. But at the moment, Malaysia's incidence of tax and transfers doesn't do that. So that implies a major reform for Malaysia, which I'm sure Prof. Norma will talk about. The organisers asked me to talk also more, so that's some big picture stuff. The organisers also asked me to talk a bit about the silver economy, or the longevity economy. It's kind of called that interchangeably, the two things. Basically, this is the idea that, with a growing elderly population or older population, it's not all bad news. They have demand also. They have demand, they have resources, they often have assets. So they're an economic resource, not just as producers, but as consumers. So this is the notion of the silver economy, and that has three dimensions. One is the direct consumption patterns of older people, so all the things they buy, goods and services that they buy. The second is an indirect effect, that all those goods and services they buy rely on a supply chain that goes back and back, and so that there's a ripple effect of all the things they supply, all the things they consume. And then the third is a kind of induced effect, is that there are people then working in those things, producing those goods and services that themselves spend. So it's this kind of ripple effect of economic activity of the older group. So the silver economy is something that gets talked about increasingly in Asia. It's one that your own Prime Minister, PM Anwar, talked about recently at a conference, and there's a quote from him there saying that Malaysia itself is keen to develop the silver economy. But you can't think of it just in terms of health or care or those kind of things. Don't think of it in frailty terms only. Think of it all that long list of things down the right-hand side of this slide and more. There are financial services, there's silver tourism, there's mature age education. There's a whole host of economic sectors that will either be new or that will be new niches within existing sectors. There's also, and this will be a rather crude example, so I apologise in advance, repurposing of existing sectors. Japan is very famous for the fact that for at least a decade, they've sold more adult diapers than they have children's diapers in Japan. Now, if you're a diaper maker in Japan 20 years ago, maybe you said, oh my God, I'm going to go out of business. In fact, you've got more business than ever, but for very different reasons. So that's the silver economy with enormous opportunities, some of them also external opportunities like medical tourism, retirement tourism, and the Thais are already kind of have gone a long way in that space already in areas like Chiang Mai. Just to quantify some of that globally, this was something done by the American Association of Retired Persons. The kind of numbers we're talking about are in the trillions, the size of the silver economy, and a tripling of those trillions to about 120 trillion by 2050, the size of that economy. The number of jobs it supports or generates will be about 1.5 billion jobs by that time. I've only got a little time left. And then you see all these other impacts. It's a really positive story. The one I would look at, consumer spending. Already older people spend 50% of consumer spending in the world, and that will rise to almost 60% by 2050. Partly because richer countries are older, but for other reasons as well. You see those, for projections for Malaysia specifically, you see those same trends expected to happen, that labour incomes would rise, their share of labour income would rise, their share of consumption and other things would rise. So final slide, and I'll finish. This is more just to lead into my following speakers, which is a broader picture of ageing policy responses. I've listed there some of the key pillars of policy response in the ageing area. Some of them are macro fiscal, employment we've talked about a lot, social protection, health, long-term care. You see them all there. A lot of these need to be done anyway, but the urgency of it and the importance of doing these becomes really existential. It's not like a luxury with ageing. All these things move from being nice things to do to being absolutely essential things to do if you want to sustain growth and sustain productivity. That has a big gender dimension to it, as you see on the cross-cutting side, and it has many other dimensions. The gender dimension particularly, I would stress, that women are particularly vulnerable to some of the risks of an ageing society, but also have a lot of the even more upside in an ageing society than perhaps men do. And all these policies, I think we need to think across the life course. Teddy Roosevelt said that ageing is like everything else in life. To be a success, you've got to start young. And it's very true. We've got to think about all these policies from, as they say, womb to tomb. And that's very much the case with ageing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pippa. I think your presentation really highlights the importance and the perspective that it gives when you look at demographic data with a long-term perspective. Clearly highlighted, Malaysia is aging faster. In general, Asian countries aging faster than OECD countries, so less time to prepare, but also at lower income levels. So also will have an impact, lower economic growth, while increasing public spending for aging population, no? Unless we take the proper policy that to support that economic trend, that demographic transition. The big risk is increased inequality, which would again have an impact. The silver economy you've mentioned as well, which by creating incentive and policy environment has a good potential to grow and actually cater for the services and support required for an aging population. So thank you very much. I think a lot of good messages that can help inform policy, and you've had 4 key areas. I think we'll cover 3 of them, even the 4 with our 3 next speakers. So Dr. Norma, if I can invite you to come and really bring us now into the social protection system and how it addresses the needs of well-being aging society and what needs to happen in the 13 Malaysia plan to address this big picture, this big trend.
Thank you, Manon. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon, senior officials of the Ministry of Economy is here, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank the organizers for having me to share our thoughts and also some of our work at the center. Although what I'm sharing today is not, is a repeat for many of you, because I think I'm repeating the same messages and highlighting the same issues and challenges. But there are also quite a few in the crowd, I think, that's not very familiar with the challenges that we are facing with regards to social protection. And having this slot is very important if I can impart the message that, if anything, if we want to ensure the well-being or to mitigate what Pips was saying earlier about becoming poor, becoming old before we become rich, then the action, what should happen is now. So it's not too late, because the median age for Malaysians now is 30 years old. For Singapore, it's about 44 years old, and for the US, it's 42 years old. So we still have that little window, but if we don't work on the infrastructure to prepare for us to have a better life, or when the Malaysians in 2057, as mentioned by Pips, that's when we are super aged, So then it'll be too late, because the productivity or the growth of the economy will depend on these working ages, which is the age of 15 to 64. And in our case, we have our retirement age at 60. So the act should be now, ladies and gentlemen, and I think it will become the foundation of the 13th Malaysia Plan, because together with the foundation that is preparing the current generation to create the kind of growth that we need in order for us to have a better life moving forward. Because the key, I think, as this morning we talked about the education that would prepare for the labor market, the last panel chaired by Azirwan, and coming to our panel where the basic services or the basic needs for us as a nation is very important. And those very basic needs, Pip had mentioned or alluded to briefly, is about healthcare, and our panel will have that. But what I'm going to do today is about the retirement income when we are old. That's very basic as well, and it is in the one of the United Nations agencies, the ILO, that defined that at least it should be 40% of the reference income in the country. So my presentation today will focus on that. However, before we get into that, I'll talk about the gaps and challenges of a stronger social protection in the country that we need. First is we have to define what is the kind of social protection as a nation that we want to, our citizen to, or Malaysians, or any individual who's in this country to enjoy. We have to define that very basic, or at the lowest level, what kind of protection are they entitled to, or is it a privilege? With the disparities and inequalities that we heard this morning from Matt and from Pips, we know that Malaysia is not equal, and we're getting more and more unequal, with 30% or 20% of our young people is engaged in the gig economy, digital work and all that, and as we know, that income is not consistent, and also the absence of social protection. Therefore, we need to work on guaranteeing at least the basic minimum for our population. Secondly is the low coverage among Malaysians. I will talk about this a lot more in the next few slides. Third is on adequacy. For those who are already in the formal sector that enjoys the EPF or the Provident Fund, which is not really a full coverage or full pension, because it does not guarantee minimum income when you retire, but you can collect the lump sum. That too is very low. About 50% has only 50,000 ringgit at the age of 55 in their accounts. And the insufficient quality human capital to meet industry needs. I think this was spoken about earlier, and social protection too have this element of labor market policies and intervention, including enabling, which higher seniors will speak about, that for older people who wants to work, it should be made easier, not just the supply side of workers wanting to work or the aged wanting to work, but at the same time, the labor market, the demand side, has to be flexible enough for the older people to join the labor force. And of course, we always talk about databases. These are one of those challenges that the ICU is working on this, and now with PADU, I hope we get at least this part stronger. And finally, the fiscal sustainability. I think it was mentioned earlier. The earlier speakers have also spoken about how our revenue base is very narrow. And our public expenditure is lower than sub-Saharan Africa. I have a work which a colleague of mine and I published in The Age, which shows that the public expenditure in Malaysia or by the Malaysian government is in the region of 21% of the GDP, whereas the sub-Saharan Africa is sub-Saharan African countries spend more than that. So why is that? Because our revenue base is very narrow. So those are our challenges. On the coverage, we have the two polar opposites of coverage that we do in Malaysia, and this we inherited since from the colonial administration, our social welfare system or social welfare where we support the very poor, so that's very charity, welfare-ish. And on the other polar opposite is the formal sector, where it is mandatory that both employers and employees contribute to the Provident Fund. And in between, a conservative projection is about 36% of the Malaysian labor force is not covered under the legal framework. That's a very conservative. So with an increased participation among Malaysians in the gig economy and the informal or self-employed, you can imagine the increase that we will have for those who do not have any kind of coverage when they are old. So, because I'm not going into the details of what kind of schemes that we have, I think we are quite familiar. So this slide is quite busy, but just to share with you that these are the gaps that we have in our social protection, especially in ensuring the well-being of the aged population. Gosh, I can't read the numbers myself. Okay, I can do it here. So out of the 33 million population, Malaysian population, there are 24.1 million adult population. This is the ages of 15 to 64. And that is 71% of the Malaysian population. And out of that, 16.9 million is in the labor force. So you have gap number one. 7.2 million is outside the labor force for various reasons, and the majority of them are women. That's gap number one. Gap number two is out of those employed, out of the labor force, 16.3% are employed, and you have an employment of 0.6%. That's gap number two. So these people are also not having any kind of coverage. And gap number three is between the formal and informal. Yeah? So these are the three gaps that we need to address as a nation. Are we allowing, we are on the cusp of becoming a high-income nation, but are we allowing a segment of our society to be poor and without that basic income, let alone, I mean, healthcare is universal at the moment, healthcare and also the long-term care that they need most. So these are some of the comparisons between the different countries. I'll not, this just, you know, PIPS has lots of graphs and numbers, I have pictures, yeah, with some numbers. So this shows the top hand shows the coverage of labor force for retirement, and this is having a retirement pension that's very low, or percentage of elderly receiving pensions. Yeah? So you can see how Malaysia is relatively low. And for the second, the lower part is coverage of adults of working age for retirement for those who are receiving pension. So it's 42%. In comparison to other countries. And this is about elderly population receiving pensions, and as you can see, it's about 20% for Malaysia, and you see the global average is 77%, and OECD is 94%. So if we want to be in the OECD club, then we have to work hard on this, because it's still very far to go. So this is our proposal. So this proposal has been presented to many forums with the government. We propose that for retirement or for the income security as the social protection floor for Malaysia, that we have this multi-tier income. So this is to ensure adequacy. So I'm supposed to stop here. So the lowest tier, we are proposing for an old age pension or basic social pension. This is, should be tax revenue. And the second pillar is that we make it mandatory for every Malaysian to contribute into a national contributory pensions fund. And for those who are unable to contribute, either because they are in school or because they are poor, then we should find a way. It could be the government, it could be from a solidarity fund or what have you. And of course, tier 2 will be the EPF, the current coverage that you have now, and tier 3 is the voluntary. So that the future income of our older population will be at least with the bantuan orang tua or the warga emas, bantuan warga emas, 500 ringgit should be expanded to at least B20, and the rest should receive the old age pension. Yeah? So the expenditure for this, we have done the calculation, is less than 1% of the GDP for the old age pension that is coming from tax revenue. And it should be near universal, and there's anyone that should be excluded or should be targeted, we should target to leave the top 10 or 20%, and that can be done very easily. So I've mentioned the rest of this, so I think I'll end my presentation. Thank you very much, Madam. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Norma. I think you've also bring to the Malaysian context very interesting data and some potential solutions as well on how to address the gap in social protection, 36%, quite high as per the estimate, and how we can address the fragmented policy environment that we have at the moment. Also the 40%, another quite percent of the population that is not covered by any pension or retirement, which is quite low compared to several other countries as well, and particularly targeting the informal sector. So we can imagine that without proper policy to address this, combining with the demographic future that we foresee, it would increase the gap, no? So now we'll move to our third speaker, another important aspect regarding aging population is health, the health sector, how it will be impacted, and what are some of the potential policies that can be help address that, to serve that aging population. Over to you. Yeah.
Salam sejahtera, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation. In the limited time that we have this afternoon, please allow me just to structure my comments, very brief comments on health transformation and aging, simply as 1, 2, and 3. 1 success, 2 key challenges, and 3 remaining opportunities. 1 success, 2 key challenges, and 3 remaining opportunities. Let's start with a success. That's always a good thing to start with, right? And I would like to also directly attribute this success to the RMK process post-independence a long time ago, and I'll explain why. Aging itself is a health sector success, and many of us here, we can expect to live long and relatively healthy lives due to pretty amazing improvements in public health and healthcare in the last few decades. Aging is a health sector success and that we should recognize and that we should celebrate together. In fact, as we consider transformation of the health sector, it's important to remember where we started off with. That Malaysia's health system started off very well after independence, and it did so because of a few reasons. There were very purposeful and very substantial investments in building, staffing, equipping, and supplying public health facilities with wide coverage and low financial barriers of access. The scale of these investments was enormous. Malaysia built a new public clinic, every 4 days for more than 20 years. A new clinic every 4 days for more than 20 years, okay, after its formation. And these investments focused in the rural areas, and they covered high-impact health services such as maternal and child health services, which are critical in a young country. And I think I would like to attribute this process to the early RMK processes, which really invested in human capital at the start of our country and reaped this dividend. But our early successes in attaining universal health coverage have bred complacency, particularly when non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, which are chronic and complex, became more prominent. Our adaptation to the challenge of preventing, diagnosing, managing, and treating NCDs, this remains an ongoing agenda. At the same time, a vibrant but parallel private system grew together with the public system, filling in gaps for services demanded by the wealthy and urbanized populations. The key question now for us really is whether we can transform and adapt our health system to the challenges and opportunities that aging brings, while preserving what is good about our existing system. Particularly, what I would like to highlight is the low financial barriers of access. So that's our one success. How about the next 2 challenges? I see 2 key challenges that aging brings to the health sector. First, aging impacts some of our key building blocks of our health system. We talked about pensions and old age savings. Health financing, really, that's one of the most obvious building blocks which we are going to face challenges with. Dependency ratios become less favorable with aging. In other words, we'll have fewer working age people to finance an increased burden of healthcare concentrated on the very young and the old. At the individual level, what does that look like? Many older persons today do not have adequate savings to draw upon for healthcare expenses in the private sector, and many are not covered and will not be offered coverage in the current paradigm of individually rated private health insurance. What about our health workforce? We had sessions on labor just before this, and skills. Health workforce issues are also going to be important to mention, as these can worsen with rapid aging. Many health workers, from a relatively smaller and smaller pool of working age adults, they may themselves be informal caregivers at home for older parents or in-laws, taking note of the gender dimensions that Pip also mentioned earlier on. What about the second challenge? The second challenge is that the healthcare needs of older persons are more complex. Well, firstly, why is this the case? It's because older persons are older, meaning they have lived many, many more years during which they can accumulate health risks, diseases, disabilities, and injuries, often more than one. Many such diseases or conditions at the same time, and we refer to these as multimorbidities. This increases the complexity and cost of healthcare. Inequalities, we mentioned that in the health sector, it's also going to be accumulated over a lifetime, and you'll become more stark as a person becomes older. Older persons are often frail. They take a little bit longer to bounce back after they've had an illness, after they've had a fall, after they've been admitted to hospital, or after they've had an operation. They also may have a higher prevalence of specific impairments such as hearing or vision loss, and this can affect their access to healthcare. It can affect their compliance to treatment regimes, and of course it will affect their well-being if we do not address these. And don't forget that the context of older persons has also changed compared with previous generations and compared with their younger selves. Family and home circumstances may be different. They may be living alone. That's going to be perhaps one of the common patterns that we see moving forward. They may be living with yet another frail older person. They may even be the caregiver of another older person. Mobility and transport may be challenging. So those are the two key challenges that I see. Next, where are the three opportunities for health transformation in the context of aging? Where are the opportunities? We don't have much time, so let me just list them. First, a high-performing health system, in my view, is a system which caters for all age groups across the life course, and vice versa. To some extent, we do not need a different health system for older persons, but we need a health system which proactively, I think that's the word that was I got in lunchtime, proactively addresses prevention, health promotion, treatment, rehabilitation, and other such functions across the life course, right? From conception, womb to tomb, as Pip mentioned. In other words, we need a better health system for all to deal with healthy longevity. Managing the burden of NCDs across the life course is critical for healthy aging. This means also addressing all the cross-sectoral determinants of health, and in Malaysia's context. And I'm glad to see actually that the food that we have here and the snacks that's laid out for us is relatively healthy. It's mainly water, which is the most healthy drink possible, and there's no sugar and other sweetened beverages. Because nutrition, obesity, tobacco, mental health, physical inactivity, these are really particularly important opportunities for stronger policy interventions, in my view. We must also transform some aspect of health service delivery, particularly primary health care, to adopt new models of person-centric integrated care that is accountable for health outcomes. Don't just leave it to the responsibility of the patient, for them to come and seek care, but something which is more comprehensive and yet closer to home. And this is critical to efficiently manage NCDs over a life course. The second opportunity, transitional care. Simply put, this is care across transitions in health states and locations, including a person's home, intermediate care settings, and acute hospitals. This is particularly important in the aging context due to frailty, which I mentioned earlier, and the disabilities associated with older age and changing home circumstances. The spectrum of transitional care includes non-acute hospital beds, intermediate care, inpatient residential settings, post-acute facilities. There may also be specific packages of services of care and healthcare which can be delivered to a person's home using technology or using single or multidisciplinary teams. And there are also services which can be an extension of primary health care in the community. This opportunity, by the way, is particularly wide open for investments and innovations, particularly involving the private sector. The third opportunity is to recognize that although I said earlier that the health system is for all ages, there are, nevertheless, specific interventions, investments, if you like, in areas which are especially important once old age is attained. And this includes further developing and expanding the coverage of specialties such as palliative care and geriatrics, both in the hospital and in the community setting, without over-medicalizing older age and death by treating it as a disease. And we should also not neglect specific interventions such as vaccines and screening programs for falls and memory loss. In fact, many of these have a very high rate of return, as treating pneumonia, treating fractures, treating dementia among older persons is very, very costly. And these conditions are also very, very debilitating for older persons. So in addition to these three opportunities, I'm nearly done here, let me also add that health transformation needs also to recognize a few more things. The importance of a modernized health workforce, ready for the future, leveraging appropriate task shifting, automation, and improved efficiency. I think we've seen the slides on the projections for the labor force and education system. We cannot just churn out armies of health workers, yeah? We have to be more efficient. Additional roles for care coordination and case management, that's also going to be increasingly needed. And let's also recognize the contribution and resources of society, not just government. Not everything can or should be delivered formally by the government or the private sector. Indeed, as we age together as a nation, the role of informal interactions within the community to support neighbors and friends is a powerful thing, and it should be activated further. Let me try and end positively, because I think aging, as we've seen with the silver economy, is not just a negative story. And it also links to the education session that we had earlier on. Because when I look at Malaysia's health outcomes and functional capacity in old age, there's a very, very strong correlation with educational status. Higher educational status is generally positively associated with indicators of healthy aging across all dimensions. Hence, as education levels have risen in each generation, we can actually expect to reap the dividend of those past investments as we age. Aging is also obviously linked to increased lifespans, and hence there is this unique opportunity, this unique intersection or convergence between healthy and hopefully productive lifespans if we can make these bold investments and choices now. So let me try and summarize. Aging is a health sector success. Two challenges with aging, one with health systems building blocks, and the other is on the complexity of healthcare needs among older persons. And three opportunities. We need to fix the health system for all with a particular view on NCDs. We need to develop transitional care to deal with frailty. And we need to really scale up specific investments to preserve and promote both health and independence among older persons as they age. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weong, and I think you've given a good historical perspective. It's also good to go back to history and why we are here and healthy. It's because there were investment in social capital and in the health system that has built and has contributed to the healthy life that several Malaysians are living, maybe not all, but several. You've mentioned as well challenges. I'm not going to repeat them also, but I just want to finish by one reflection, because I think a lot of what you said, and it's something I've listened on a podcast actually one day about health, which was saying health is not when you go to see the doctor, it's actually everything that happens in between two visits to the doctor. And I think by talking about preventions and the investment, the transitional care is actually the investment in the silver economy, is all dimensions that are what's happening between our two visits at the doctor. So thank you very much. And I think you ended as well very nicely with the segment of our last speaker talking about it's also an opportunity for productive life. So I'm very pleased to invite Ms. Yu Yang to bring the industry perspective. How do we bring aging population to stay or to continue in the labor force? No? Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about Hire Seniors. We're basically a recruitment agency with a difference, because we only focus on connecting seniors to the workforce. So if you're an employer and you are hired through us, you know that you're helping to promote productivity among seniors. Okay? Yes. Right. So the question, if you're talking about how do we then help, we do this through our industry collaboration. We are very privileged to have been able to work with industry partners, with agencies, with corporates. I mean, all these people who have been able to support us in many ways. Now, why do they do this? Because they realize that we are able to offer them candidates who are flexible, candidates who are willing to work at short notice, who are able to work, get into the job and start working, especially if it's only for short term. For example, we may have companies that want to hire just to replace someone who is on long leave. So they don't want to have to spend money on training, but a senior person with experience will come in, do the job, and we also know that chances of this person completing the tenure of contract is definitely higher, because being retired, or they are able to commit to the role until the completion of the program, the contract. Now, a very important thing that we want to talk about, we're excited to have been able to work with Khazanah and PKSO on the MyStep program. We were appointed the project implementer by Khazanah to help place a limited number of seniors to companies who are willing to try them out for 6 months. It's a great opportunity for these employers because they then get to try these candidates that they've chosen themselves, and for a period of 6 months at no additional headcount cost to them. And I'm very happy to say that at the end of that period, close to 80% of our people that were placed in these companies continued to have employment, either with these companies or with other companies. Right? But of course, during this program, we were also able to offer some training to help keep them abreast of developments, basically new office tools at the workplace, because there's a lot of perception about seniors not being up to date in terms of technology. We also provide some training for them. So this obviously helped a lot. Very happy with that. Unfortunately, that program was terminated. We are not able to have the program the last 2 years. Hopefully, we're going to get that back again soon. All right. I think there's something about a survey done about many people who have retired are not interested in going back to the workforce. I would like to say that that may be true, especially for some people. It's obviously an individual choice. But from the experience, of working with many people who are preparing for retirement, we find that initially they say, no, I think I want to go for a holiday after I retire. But how long can they go for holiday, right? So we find that very often when maybe the first few months that they retire, they may want to go on holiday, but after a while they get bored. They want to get engaged with society again. They want to be able to contribute. And this is where we come in, and these are people who are able to, go back and contribute, share their skills. All right, one of the reasons that we face difficulty at the moment, all right, is with the perception, both of employers as well as our candidates. Employers very much simply because they do not, because they have this perception that seniors are slower, seniors have health issues, seniors have technological challenges. But the truth is that I think all of you know that everyone can have health challenges. Everyone can have all these technological challenges. It's about changing that mindset. As I've mentioned just now, those who tried our candidates have actually come back to us. Not only have they continued employing many of them, but they actually come back to us for new candidates because they realize that these senior workers are able to commit to the job and they can value add to the job simply because of their experience, their skills, and the flexibility that they offer. All right. For example, going back then again, sometimes these companies, especially the smaller companies, they want to hire, they need the skills, but the volume of work does not merit a full month's salary. So they work with our candidates to come to an agreement whereby our candidates can go and work maybe as an advisor or just on a part-time basis to complete a specific amount of work. Okay. Now, just give you an example. I think a few examples. We've got a candidate who was very, very highly paid, very, very skilled in what she did. But after 2 years of retirement, she got bored. She came back. She came to us and said, "I want a job." She eventually found a job, a similar type of job, but with a narrower scope, less stress. Of course, it came with a small pay cut as well. But she's, until now, happy with what she's doing. And the important thing is she's contributing. All right. Another example we have is someone who actually happily retired, very active in retirement and not thinking of work. when we had an employer that came to us and said, we need someone very experienced, only for about 6 months, for a very urgent work. This lady wasn't prepared to work. She was happily retired. But we managed to persuade her to come back to work just for a short while. Think about it. You know, if you like it, you continue. Not happy, you just don't take up the job. I'm happy to say that some 2 years later, she's actually still on the job. The thing is, she finished the project. The project was supposed to finish within 6 months. Because of her skills, she was able to finish it inside 4 months. Her employer was very happy, so happy that they actually have continued to hire her until now. There are many examples that I could tell you, but we continue to face a lot of challenges on perception, because I think what we need really is awareness of the ability of seniors to continue participating in the workforce. Awareness that because of our health system and our education system, so much has changed the past 50 years or so. People can continue working beyond 50, beyond 60. Just to share, right, the oldest candidate we have placed was 74 years old at the time that we placed him. Yes, doesn't happen very often, but we're happy to say that it was done. Right? So the perception is very important. Maybe also practices. We've got a practice of setting a retirement age. That also prepares our mindset, right? So if we could maybe consider certain things, how we can reprogram that mindset, have more awareness program, and with that, we will have more acceptance of seniors at the workplace, and also with the acceptance, I think we'll find that together with the others, certainly the senior workers can help to contribute to our economic growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eng. And I think 74, with the demographic trend and the life expectancy, you probably have more than 74 in the coming years, maybe including some of us as well, in your program in the next 20 years. But thank you very much for sharing really on-the-ground experience from the industry. And I think, this need to change perceptions about how senior people can still be active and contribute. And I think very often we look at this from an economic perspective. They need to be in the workforce because of all the data that we have seen. But actually there's also a whole component of well-being, connecting to community and overall well-being, mental health as well of senior people. It helps combat as well loneliness and exclusion. So there's also a lot of social benefits, the economic but also social benefit, no? So.
Sorry, I can also add, right? We actually have feedback from our candidates who, after working for a while, actually call us, unsolicited calls. They call us to tell us, I'm so happy I'm working now because with being able to work, I feel happier, I have less pains, and my wife or my husband, my spouse, my family is basically happier.
Very good, connects to the health dimension. So the visit to the doctor are extending, no, instead of getting closer. Okay, so I think we have, maybe time for 1 or 2 questions before we close the panel. I don't know if there are any questions from the audience. Any questions? Oh, there are actually questions. Okay, so maybe what I'm going to do, we can look at the 4 questions, and then whoever would like to take one that goes. And then you have maybe 1 minute each to pick one of those. How do you calculate the contribution of silver economy to the economy, as most data does not separate according to age, such as consumer buy-in? So maybe for Pip. Does Malaysia have a potential risk being population collapse? I think. Who would like to take this one? To whom? Prof. Norma or Pip? And then how can Malaysia tap into the growing silver economy to become a key driver of GDP growth, and which sectors are poised to benefit the most? And the last question, what strategic investment are needed to expand and adapt Malaysia healthcare infrastructure to meet the growing demand for geriatric and care services? So I think there's quite an interest on the investment side and how we bring public-private sector investment in some of those silver economy and care economy area.
Maybe I'll do population collapse and something on silver economy. I don't think Malaysia's at imminent risk of a population collapse. That's the short answer, I think. In contrast, the word population collapse always sounds very catastrophic. If anybody in the region, if you want to use that term, is at risk of that, it's Korea. They're definitely. But even China's now 1.4 billion. They project by the end of the century it will be somewhere between 800 and 900 million. So major reduction in population, which will be fascinating to see. Its population is already shrinking. Japan's is shrinking, as you know. Korea's is shrinking. Malaysia's not yet at that point, and 1.6, which is your current fertility rate, according to DOSM, there's a lot of OECD countries that have sustained that. One big question, though, the ones that have sustained it and sustained economic vibrancy have tended to have quite a bit of immigration, both temporary and permanent. My own country is an example. In Australia, 28% of people are born in a foreign, of residents are born in a foreign country. So that's been the way we've dealt with a fertility rate that's very similar to Malaysia's, actually. So, so I think, firstly, it's not imminent in any event, and secondly, there are ways of mitigating it. And I know immigration's always a sensitive issue everywhere, and particularly in Malaysia, but there are ways of mitigating it. The second on the measurement of the silver economy, it's a good question. I often wonder the same thing myself. Where do these magical numbers come from? I think some of them come from household surveys. So they look, at big household surveys and look at the expenditure patterns, and there they are able to disaggregate according to age groups. But a lot of consumption information is actually taggable by age. So, when we register for a credit card or whatever, they know our details. And so some of it is from studies there where it's anonymised, but they're looking at consumption patterns where they are able to see that by age. But it's an excellent question, I think. And then other ones, just like healthcare, we know from a long time that a lot of healthcare spending happens at older ages. So there are certain areas of spending that we know are, even without measuring them, are highly concentrated by later ages.
Can I just pick up on the sectors or the industries for the silver economy, which I think the word that many are using, also the care economy, they're various, yeah? It could be in the form of technology, innovation, AI, robotics, that's one aspect of it. But the other one is social care. I mean, it's the care, yeah? The service economy. And I think more of that, in the past, we talk about care for children, but now, or for infants, and now it's for the older person. So I think what the center is working on is also promoting or pushing the government to look into the social work, the Social Work Act. Because at the moment, our young people, or not many people, would want to get into social work because of various reasons, yeah. But most importantly, it's not attractive. Whereas nursing, we get a lot of our young Malaysians to go into nursing, but not social work. So if the way forward is to professionalize. So you can professionalize it through having the act that would indicate the kind of services or the level, the quality of services, but at the same time having the social protection also for the social work. Yeah. So this is one of the things that I can think of, but of course, there are many others. I hope that is already, because it's gone in for the first reading a few years ago, the Social Work Act, but I hope it becomes, is passed by Parliament soon. Yeah, thank you.
Should I touch on the strategic investments? So just gut feel rather than data-driven. I wish I could give a data-driven answer. I would invest in people, so training people to be care workers and to be geriatricians and to have these skills. That's one investment I'll put. The other is that I think we need to be aware of the affordability gap. So if there's any interventions, either investments or something that we can do, like what Prof. Norma has already described, so that actually things will be affordable for people either in their age group or by their family members, then I think that's another important investment to think of. And the third one is services which really connect the dots. So I think there are mobile apps and tech-driven things which connect people to geriatric or allied health services that they may need for older persons. I think that's what's critical. I'll be hesitant to say let's build more buildings and more of the hard infrastructure. I'll be hesitant to say that.
Maybe I can just add on this to respond to this, and which sectors are poised to benefit the most. Based on experience, right, we have actually have many companies that come to us from diverse background industries. We've got manufacturers, we've had IT companies. In fact, one IT company that's come to us, when they first approached us, I actually told them, but our candidates are all seniors, we don't have young people for you. And lo and behold, this business owner, very smart, he said, no, I just want a very senior person who can manage. I don't need him to know IT at all. We found him someone, and 1 month later, he actually called me back and said, very good, I like having him. He offers stability to my company, so that's good. So as in sectors, I think it really depends on how we can utilize this wealth of skills optimally.
Thank you very much. I think that already brings us to the end of the panel, unfortunately. But I think it was a very exciting complementary presentation, really looking at economic, social, the industry perspective, health, all the key dimension of a aging society, and that they all actually interconnect with each other, and they will really need strong policy drive, but also private sector engagement, going back to when Minister this morning was talking about bringing everyone, and I think that's an area where we will need all sector of society, NGOs, private sector, and financing and policy, strong policy support. So thank you very much, everyone, and I think there was very good inputs for the continuity of the formulation of the 13th Malaysia Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manon Bernier, for moderating the session. Let's have a quick photograph with all members of the panel to wrap the session up right in front of the table so we can get everybody nice and clear in the shot. Panel, would you kindly join us up front for a quick photograph? Thank you, everyone. This was probably the most exciting one for me because lifelong learning, aging gracefully, those are all topics that are close to our hearts, especially when we hit the good old 40, I believe. Thank you very much to our panel on the demographic change, preparing Malaysia towards an aged nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached this juncture in the event where I need to check on the audience. Is everybody okay? You doing all right? Well, let's check out in physical manner. Could you raise your right hand, everyone? Wave it around like you just don't care. All right? Keep it up there. Hang on. Don't put it down just yet. Make this symbol with me. Here I have the universal sign for okay or absolutely nothing. It also looks like a number 3. Lift it up. All right. Now take this symbol with me and place it on your chin. Now, in case